I was gonna get the diaper and somebody said, hola, and I didn't see nothing since. I woke up right here on the floor and I didn't see him.
The desperate search for a 7-month-old boy who was reported kidnapped in Southern California has taken a dark turn after his parents were arrested under suspicion of murder. Friday, August 22nd, Jake and Rebecca Haro were arrested for murder just over 1 week after their child went missing. Police stormed the murder suspect's Cabazon home and cuffed the disheveled and eerily emotionless couple before being separately hauled off.
Cuffed alongside San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies and cadaver dogs near brush just off the 60 freeway by Gilman Springs Road on Sunday, a remote field here in Moreno Valley about 10 miles south of where baby Emanuel was initially reported missing in Yucaipa.
You would think a mother tearfully begging for the return of her 7-month-old baby, allegedly snatched from a parking lot, is a tragedy. But what happens if it was all just a performance? What happens when police discover the child had already vanished? A full 9 days before the 911 call was even made. Today, we are uncovering the chilling case of baby Emanuel Haro, where a parent's tears were used to mask a dark secret buried beneath massive landfills. Brace yourselves, because the truth behind this story will haunt you. The story starts the exact way a lot of our absolute worst nightmares do. It's August 14th, and you have a frantic mother, Rebecca Haro, and a distraught father, Jake Haro, standing right in front of the local news cameras. They looked raw, they looked utterly vulnerable, and in those first few desperate hours, that vulnerability makes you want to drop everything and help them. We saw the heart-wrenching images of Jake Haro pleading through his tears, saying, "Whoever took our son, please give him back." And the story they told the world, it was terrifying. Rebecca claims she was in the parking lot of a Big 5 sporting goods store in Yucaipa. It was evening, and she said she needed to change 7-month-old Emanuel's diaper. She laid him down near the car, and that's when the world supposedly went completely black. She told reporters and police that a mysterious woman approached her in the shadows and said just one single word, "Hola," looking straight into the news cameras. With a visible, nasty black eye serving as her physical proof of the attack, Rebecca delivered her chilling account.
I noticed a smell from my baby, so I wanted to change it before I walked into the store. I took him out of the car seat and I laid him on the chair. And I had his diapers right here. And then someone said, hola. And I couldn't even turn, and I was just, I don't remember nothing. I got up off the floor and I didn't see my child. Someone took him from me.
It's a narrative that plays on every parent's deepest, darkest fear, that you can turn your head for a split second to take care of your child's basic needs. And a predator is just waiting there in the shadows. And because of that fear, the community responded exactly how you'd expect. Strangers rallied, search parties were formed, and flyers were plastered everywhere for this missing baby boy. But what no one knew was that the scene at the Big 5 wasn't a crime scene at all. It was a stage. This is where the story takes a dark turn. According to explosive court documents later revealed, investigators uncovered a timeline that shatters this entire parking lot illusion. The horrifying truth is that little Emanuel wasn't kidnapped on August 14th. Authorities believe the 7-month-old infant was actually killed sometime between August 5th and August 14th. I gotta be honest with you guys, this part really makes my blood boil. Think about what that timeline actually means. It means that for up to 9 days, this couple likely knew exactly what happened to their son. For 9 days, they lived with an unspeakable secret. And instead of calling for help, they spent that time formulating a script, practicing their lines and preparing to look the world in the eye to sell a complete fabrication. I'm curious, how do you even comprehend that level of cold calculation? Does it make your blood boil too, knowing they let an entire community panic and search for a baby that was already gone? Let me know below what stands out to you most about this timeline. Because for me, it changes absolutely everything. They weren't frantic parents. They were actors putting on the performance of a lifetime. While the community was out there sweating in the California heat, desperately searching for little Emanuel, law enforcement was doing something else entirely. They were watching the parents. In a homicide investigation, detectives don't just look at the surface of a tragic story. They look for the cracks, and in the case of Jake and Rebecca Haro, those cracks were gaping wide open from the very first moment they spoke to the press. Let's look at the visual anchor of Rebecca's kidnapping story. Her black eye. When she stood in front of the news cameras, she pointed to that visible purple and yellow bruise as physical proof that she had fought a kidnapper in that parking lot. But detectives are trained to look past the emotion. The problem with bruises is that they tell time. A fresh blow from a knockout punch doesn't look like a week-old healing wound. Almost immediately, investigators noticed her injury wasn't fresh at all. It eventually came to light that Rebecca reportedly had that exact same black eye nearly 2 weeks before she ever called 911 to report the abduction. She had literally repurposed an old injury, pointing to a fading wound and telling the world it was fresh, just to back up a new lie. But the horrifying discoveries didn't stop at her face. Little did they know, their physical movements were about to expose a level of premeditation that is truly chilling. The parking lot at the Big 5 sporting goods store wasn't just a random location chosen in a moment of panic. It has been reported that weeks before the night Rebecca claimed she was attacked, the couple had visited that exact same store, but they weren't there to shop for camping gear. Allegedly, the couple asked employees where their security cameras were located, using a cover story about their car being broken into. Previously, they were literally casing the location. They were actively checking the blind spots to figure out exactly where they could stage a crime without being seen by digital eyes. And while the walls were closing in behind the scenes, Jake Haro was still on television, playing the role of the innocent, heartbroken father. Yet if you watch his interviews from those early days, there is an eerie calmness to him. When asked to describe his missing son, he didn't sound frantic.
A little lazy eye. What's the only thing that's distinctive about him, that he has no birthmarks.
Light skin.
Beautiful, healthy baby boy. 7-month-old baby boy.
He sounded terrifyingly detached. Hearing him describe his son as a beautiful, healthy baby boy, while investigators already suspected the child was deceased, is enough to send shivers down your spine. I really want to hear your thoughts on this. What do you guys make of this? A mother using an old, healing wound as a prop to fake a violent attack, and parents actively scouting camera blind spots weeks in advance. Do you think this was just a sudden panic move to cover up an accident? Or was this a cold-blooded, calculated plan from the very beginning? Drop your take in the comments, because seeing that level of staging completely changes how you view these two. While the community was pouring their hearts out, sweating in the blazing California heat, and flying drones over vast stretches of the desert, hoping to spot a missing baby, investigators were looking somewhere entirely different. They weren't just staring at the dirt, they were staring at the data. Because in modern investigations, you can lie to the press and you can lie to the police, but you absolutely cannot lie to the surveillance grid. This is where the story takes a deeply disturbing turn. Authorities pulled search warrants for Jake and Rebecca's cell phone records and vehicle GPS data. Remember that wholesome family timeline they tried to sell the public? The one where they claimed they attended a high school football game for their older son right before the supposed kidnapping? The digital footprint completely disintegrated that alibi. The data showed a series of movements that didn't resemble a family outing at all. In fact, it confirmed what witnesses had already reported: no one saw baby Emanuel at that football game. Instead, the GPS tracked the couple making a series of highly suspicious stops. And they weren't stopping to frantically search for a lost child. They were stopping at commercial dumpsters. I gotta be honest with you. This part absolutely makes my blood boil. If you have a sick child, you rush to a hospital. If a terrible accident happens and you are grieving, you call 911. But stopping at commercial dumpsters in the middle of the night means you are actively treating a human being, your own flesh and blood, like refuse. This devastating digital trail led prosecutors to a horrifying working theory. Emanuel was never taken from a parking lot, and he wasn't buried out in the desert badlands. His little body was likely placed in a trash receptacle, picked up by a waste management truck, and deposited directly into the Lamb Canyon landfill. For investigators, a landfill is an absolute nightmare. It is a massive shifting landscape where waste is constantly compacted under extreme weight and buried under tons of soil every single day. If Emanuel was discarded there days or even weeks before the kidnapping was ever reported, the chances of recovering him dropped to almost zero. I couldn't stop thinking about how utterly devastating this realization is. While kind-hearted strangers were printing out missing flyers and rallying together hoping for a miracle, this little boy was likely being buried under mountains of debris. Does this make your blood boil too? It takes a specific sinister kind of darkness to throw your own baby away in a dumpster. Drop your take in the comments. Is this just the ultimate panic move from a couple of cowards trying to cover their tracks, or does this prove pure unadulterated sociopathy? To truly understand how this tragedy reached the point of a baby being discarded like trash, we have to look away from the digital trail and look back in time. Because Jake Haro didn't just snap one day As investigators peeled back the layers of his life, they didn't find a clean slate. They found a horrifying pattern. The horrifying truth is that Emanuel wasn't the first infant to suffer under Jake's roof. Back in 2018, Jake was arrested for willful child cruelty. His victim was his own daughter, who was only 10 weeks old, a completely defenseless infant. The injuries she sustained are absolutely devastating. Court records detailed a fractured skull, a brain hemorrhage, and multiple healing rib fractures, meaning she was hurt. Her tiny body began to knit itself back together. And then, she was hurt again. Today, that little girl is permanently disabled. She is blind, unable to speak, and has cerebral palsy. She will suffer for the rest of her life because of what her father did to her when she was just a newborn. This is the part that really makes my blood boil when you realize what happened next. You would think a man who inflicted that level of trauma on a newborn would be locked away for a very long time, right? Well, in 2023, Jake stood before Superior Court Judge Dwight Moore. Prosecutors had the medical records, they knew the child was permanently disabled, and they explicitly argued for prison time. But instead of protecting future children, the judge decided to show mercy and handed down a suspended sentence. Before I tell you the exact words this judge used to let a known violent offender walk free, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. We dive deep into cases like this to expose the fatal cracks in our justice system, and your support helps me keep doing this research to bring these stories to light. Let's get back to the courtroom. According to court transcripts, instead of dropping the hammer, Judge Moore looked at Jake Haro and said, "I'm giving you a chance. Don't mess it up. Good luck. Good luck." He actually wished a convicted attacker good luck. Jake politely replied, "Thank you," and walked right out the front door of the courthouse. What struck me the most was the overwhelming apathy of it all. The system didn't just fail to punish Jake, it actively enabled him. By prioritizing a violent offender's second chance over the safety of innocent children, the court gambled with the future. That leniency was a fatal loophole that indirectly signed baby Emanuel's death warrant. As the district attorney later pointed out, if that judge had just done his job, Emanuel would still be alive today. I'm curious, how would you feel if a system designed to protect the innocent failed this spectacularly for someone you love? Drop your take in the comments, because seeing a judge practically hand a child over to an executioner is just unimaginable. The nightmare was only just beginning to unravel for Jake and Rebecca Haro. Just days after their tearful, heavily broadcasted press conference, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department finally made their move. They didn't politely ask the couple to come down to the station for a follow-up interview. They showed up directly at their door. When the deputies marched them out of their home in handcuffs, the visual was incredibly telling. Jake was walked out in his boxers, and Rebecca was still in her pajamas. This is where the story takes a dark turn, because that casual attire tells us everything about their mindset in those final hours of freedom. They were comfortable, they were sleeping. They actually believed they had gotten away with it, assuming the community was still out there chasing a phantom kidnapper based on their fabricated story. But once those cuffs clicked, the dynamic completely shifted. Jake was no longer a grieving father. He was a primary murder suspect, and when a suspect is backed into a corner and caught in a massive lie, they usually play their last remaining card: the location of the body. In a surreal and heavily publicized move, detectives pulled Jake from his cell, put him in an orange jumpsuit and shackles, and drove him out to the desolate Badlands near Moreno Valley, right along Highway 60. The footage of this search is absolutely haunting. You see a massive convoy of law enforcement SUVs parked along the dusty, blistering hot road. Jake is seen walking with detectives, pointing at random hills, looking confused one minute and appearing to cry the next. For a brief moment, everyone held their breath. We all hoped this massive deployment of K-9 units, drone operators, and lines of officers combing through the thick brush would finally bring little Emanuel home. But hours dragged into days, and search and rescue teams found absolutely nothing. Not a single trace. I gotta be honest with you, this part is incredibly frustrating. While detectives were sweating in the unforgiving California heat, Jake was just taking them on a wild goose chase. Prosecutors would later state in court that Jake was merely pretending to help. He didn't suddenly forget where he left his son. He was deliberately manipulating the police. He likely offered a fake location just to get out of his loud, dangerous jail cell, enjoy a ride in an air-conditioned SUV, and feel like he was the one in control. One last time, what struck me the most was the sheer cruelty of dragging everyone out there, weaponizing his tears to stage a fake search, all while knowing investigators were wasting precious time. Drop your take in the comments. Does it make your blood boil knowing he played this sick psychological game with the police while his son was still missing? Once the heavy metal doors slammed shut and the couple was placed in separate interrogation rooms, the narrative completely shifted. Usually, when a couple commits an unthinkable crime together, they promise to stick to the script and present a united front to the world. But isolation does something terrifying to the human mind. Once they were in separate cells, staring at four walls and facing a potential life sentence, paranoia began to set in. The us against the world mentality shattered into a brutal game of me against you. We call this the prisoner's dilemma. Two people commit a crime, they promise to stay quiet, but eventually, someone is going to start wondering if the other is cutting a deal. What we saw in the weeks following their arrest was a bizarre psychological study in contrasts. On one side, you had Jake Haro. He had been through the justice system before, and he knew exactly how the game was played. Jake was unsettlingly quiet. He seemingly understood the gravity of the situation, instantly, realizing that the police didn't even need a verbal confession, because the digital footprint and the dumpster stops had already completely exposed them. I gotta be honest with you, it's chilling to picture him sitting in that cell, stone-faced, coldly calculating the math of his sentence. He knew their unified front was a rapidly sinking ship. If he kept lying, he was going down for first-degree murder and a life sentence without parole. He was looking for an exit strategy. But then, on the exact opposite side of this twisted dynamic, you had Rebecca. Even from behind bars, she continued to cling desperately to the fabricated kidnapping script. Even when detectives explicitly confronted her, revealing they knew about the late-night dumpster visits and that her black eye was weeks old, she maintained her absolute innocence. She gave interviews, she continued to cry, and she relentlessly played the role of the devastated, grieving mother whose baby was snatched by a phantom stranger in a parking lot. This is where the story becomes incredibly polarizing, and it's a debate that absolutely tears the community apart. There is a school of thought that looks at Rebecca and sees a genuine broken victim. They see a woman who was battered, deeply manipulated, and so terrified of her severely abusive husband that she was psychologically incapable of breaking the script he forced upon her. But then there's the other side. The side that remembers she actively scouted camera blind spots at the sporting goods store and lived her life for over a week before ever reporting her child missing. That isn't just paralyzing fear. That looks a lot like active, calculated participation. What do you guys make of this dynamic? Do you see Rebecca as a cold mastermind who helped plan this entire cover-up? Or do you view her as just another one of Jake's tragic victims who is too terrified to tell the truth? It's a horrifying debate because while she was publicly spiraling and holding on to a ghost story, Jake was secretly preparing a legal maneuver that would cut her loose and leave her completely stranded on an island of lies. Everyone watching this case was bracing for a massive, drawn-out legal battle. We all expected months of exhausting pretrial motions, suppression hearings, and the usual slow grind of the justice system. But no one could have predicted what happened next. Jake Haro decided to go completely off the script. During what was supposed to be a routine administrative felony settlement conference in October 2025, the atmosphere inside the courtroom shifted instantly. Jake wasn't sitting there stone-faced anymore. Witnesses reported that he was actually crying. And then he did something that defense attorneys usually beg their clients never to do, unless they have an ironclad deal in place. He pleaded guilty. But he didn't just take a reduced charge to save his own skin. In a stunning legal move, Jake entered a straight-up plea directly to the court. There was absolutely no plea agreement with the district attorney's office. He simply looked at the judge and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, completely shocking everyone in the room. Before I explain the truly sinister motive behind these courtroom tears, please take a quick second to hit that subscribe button. We are dedicated to exposing the dark truths behind cases just like this, and your support helps me keep digging into these investigations. Now, let's look at what Jake was really trying to hide. I gotta be honest with you. I don't buy those tears for a single second. While it might look like a sudden wave of remorse, legal experts watching the case noticed a much darker, calculated strategy at play. By entering a straight-up guilty plea, Jake effectively shut down the absolute need for a public jury trial. This is where the story takes a dark turn, because by stopping the trial, the most gruesome, horrifying details of exactly how little Emanuel died would never fully come out in public. There wouldn't be medical examiners taking the stand to testify about brutal injuries or bone fractures. He knew that if this went to trial, the prosecution would completely paint him as a monster. By pleading guilty, Jake controlled the narrative one last time and kept the darkest secrets of that house completely hidden. But what struck me the most, and what makes this so incredibly hard to stomach, is what he didn't say. Even as he stood there crying, even as he admitted to being a murderer, Jake Haro absolutely refused to give up the exact location of his son. He didn't provide a map. He didn't point to a specific dumpster. He just said guilty and coldly sat down. He gave the court a legal confession, but he denied a grieving family a physical body. I'm curious, how would you feel if a killer gave you a legal victory but purposefully withheld the only thing that actually matters? Does it make your blood boil knowing he might be holding on to that location just to use it as a twisted bargaining chip for parole decades from now? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. When Jake Haro's straight-up confession sent shockwaves through the courtroom, it simultaneously pushed his wife, Rebecca Haro, into a brutal dilemma. That unified front the couple promised the media had completely collapsed, leaving this mother isolated on an island of lies. Initially, Rebecca was facing a second-degree murder charge, a severe offense that could have put her away for life. But staring down that dark reality, her survival instinct kicked in. Rather than risk facing a jury in a highly publicized trial, Rebecca and her defense team opted for a much more calculated strategy, cutting a deal to save herself. In late May 2026, during a preliminary hearing in Riverside, the entire trajectory of the case shifted when a plea agreement was reached. Rebecca Haro stood in court, tears streaming down her face, and officially changed her plea to guilty. She admitted to 3 counts: child endangerment resulting in great bodily injury, involuntary manslaughter, and being an accessory after the fact. This agreement was a calculated legal maneuver. In exchange for admitting to the lesser charges, the district attorney's office completely dropped the second-degree murder charge against her. With this move, Rebecca accepted a sentence of 12 years and 8 months behind bars, officially closing the door on her freedom, but successfully dodging the life sentence her husband is currently serving. But the most devastating truth revealed in that courtroom wasn't found in the legal paperwork. It came straight from the medical evidence. Prosecutors announced explosive findings from specialists at Loma Linda Hospital, who had reviewed all the photographic and digital evidence of Emanuel's short life. This medical reality completely shattered any lingering theories of a sudden accident or a momentary panic. Experts concluded that the most likely cause of death was severe head trauma stemming from prolonged, extensive physical violence. That poor baby was living in an absolute hell right inside his own home, and Rebecca knew it, yet she chose to look the other way. This bone-chilling indifference led to one of the most powerful accusations ever delivered in that courtroom. Standing before the judge, the prosecutor delivered a blistering statement that completely ripped away the victim mask Rebecca had worn for the cameras. I gotta be honest with you guys, this detail makes my blood boil. It completely exposes the sinister reality behind Rebecca's tears. Her nearly 13-year sentence reflects a crime of omission and complicity. As her own flesh and blood suffered accumulating injuries day after day, she didn't seek help. Instead, she allegedly helped her husband scout security cameras to stage a perfect cover-up. What do you guys make of Rebecca's role in all of this? Do you think this sentence is way too light for a mother who just closed her eyes and let her child walk right into his own death? Drop your take in the comments below, because watching a mother choose to play the victim instead of protecting her baby is something that can never, ever be justified. Finally, the long-awaited day of reckoning arrived. In November 2025, the Riverside Hall of Justice was packed to the absolute brim, with people literally being turned away at the doors. Usually, a sentencing hearing marks the final chapter of a true crime story. It's the definitive moment where the judge's gavel slams down, the perpetrator gets handcuffed, and the credits finally roll. But for baby Emanuel Haro, the atmosphere inside that crowded courtroom wasn't one of victory or relief. It was incredibly heavy. It was suffocating, because even though everyone knew these 2 parents were going to prison, there was a ghost in the room. Emanuel was still missing. When the judge took the bench, there was absolutely no leniency left to give. The system had clearly learned its fatal lesson from 2018. Jake Haro was sentenced to the maximum penalty allowed under California law: 25 years to life for second-degree murder, plus additional time for his prior offenses and weapon charges, stacking his consecutive sentences to over 31 years behind bars before he could even whisper the word parole. Months later, his wife, Rebecca Haro, stood in front of the exact same justice system and received a sentence of 12 years and 8 months for her undeniable complicity and failure to protect her own flesh and blood. On paper, justice was served, But the reality on the ground was a completely different story. The courtroom was thick with an agonizing, unresolved grief that you could feel through the screen. Emanuel's maternal grandmother, Rebecca's own mother, took the stand to deliver a heartbreaking victim impact statement. Through her tears, she laid bare the absolute devastation this couple had caused, stating on the record,
"He destroyed my whole family. He branded his children for life. He damaged her children, all his children for life. He changed my daughter for where we don't know who she is."
Think about the immense, shattering pain in those words. A mother standing in a courtroom, completely unable to recognize the cold, calculated stranger her own daughter had become. But the agony wasn't just confined to the family. The community that had desperately searched the scorching deserts and handed out missing flyers was boiling over with pure, unfiltered rage. As the horrifying reality set in that Jake might one day be eligible to walk free, the frustration erupted. One heartbroken community member, standing outside the courthouse, looked directly into the news cameras and screamed the exact questions that were haunting everyone's minds.
"Where's the baby? Now that he got sentenced, where's the baby? Just say it. Just where's the baby? He deserved better."
What struck me the most was the deafening, cruel silence from Jake and Rebecca in response to that desperate plea. They accepted their lengthy prison sentences, but they absolutely refused to give up the one piece of information that actually mattered to everyone involved. They kept the location of their son's tiny body completely hidden in the dark. I gotta be honest with you guys. This level of post-arrest cruelty is almost impossible to comprehend. Do you think they are keeping his location a secret out of genuine shame? Or are they holding on to it as a twisted bargaining chip for a parole hearing decades from now? Drop your take in the comments, because this sentence feels less like closure and more like a permanent open wound. So, here we are at the end of the road. The news trucks have finally packed up and left Riverside. The search ribbons tied around the trees are fading in the California sun. Jake and Rebecca Haro are officially inmates in the state penitentiary system, and the mysterious Ola lady has been completely exposed as nothing more than a cruel ghost story. On paper, the justice system finally worked. Prosecutors got the confessions, the judge handed down the heavy sentences, and they legally closed the file on the tragic murder of 7-month-old Emanuel Haro. But I gotta be honest with you guys, the part of this case that haunts me the absolute most isn't the prison sentences they received. It's the overwhelming, suffocating silence that followed them. Usually, when we reach the end of these dark cases, there is a genuine sense of closure. You know exactly who did it, the perpetrators are locked away, and the victim is finally resting in peace. But here, I look at the photos of little Emanuel with those wide, innocent eyes, and I simply cannot reconcile it with the horrifying reality that his final resting place is likely lost forever beneath tons of compacted waste in a landfill. That isn't closure. That is a terrifying void. A solved case implies a funeral. It implies a headstone. It implies that a grieving grandmother actually has a quiet place to go and weep for the grandchild she lost. Emanuel doesn't have any of that. Because of the cold, calculated silence of his own parents, he is still out there, somewhere in the dark, entirely alone. The system did work this time, but it worked entirely too late. The hardest lesson we have to take away from this tragedy isn't about the dangers of dark parking lots or stranger danger. It's about the dangerous, often fatal gamble of giving violent criminals second chances. A judge once looked at Jake Haro, a man who broke an infant's skull, and wished him good luck. Baby Emanuel paid the ultimate price for that leniency. Yet, even in the face of that colossal systemic failure, we have to acknowledge the absolute relentless dedication of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's detectives. When the parents lied to the cameras, the detectives dug into the data. They were the only people in that courtroom truly fighting for Emanuel, and they are the sole reason those two are sitting behind bars today. Jake and Rebecca might think this is over. They might think they can just serve their time and fade into obscurity, but until the earth finally gives up its secrets, or until a conscience miraculously wakes up inside a cold prison cell, this case remains a painfully open wound. What do you guys think? Does this ending bring you any actual sense of relief? Or does the fact that he's still missing ruin the justice served? Let me know down below. I'll keep digging, and if there is ever an update on his recovery, you will be the first to know. Thanks for walking this incredibly dark path with me, and for all the comments you guys make doing this heavy research. Worth it. Stay safe, stay observant, and I'll see you in the next one.